Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a woman to society.
Then so shall you be. Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to A Menace to Society. Today I'm finishing up my chat with Jon Uhler. Jon is an LPC, meaning he's a licensed professional counselor. He has worked with prison inmates, very violent inmates, people in solitary, as well as their victims. And he's back to break down the differences between psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists. Please enjoy. What are the differences between sociopaths and psychopaths?
Good people are going to differ on this. I kind of hold a minority view, so I'll kind of give you the standard. The standard answer out in the field of mental health would be that psychopaths are very rare, and they are really extreme and outlandish. Not just either bloody psychopaths, but those are the ones. Bernie Madoff, Madoff with everybody's money from NASDAQ. Those would be the extreme psychopaths, and they're very rare. Sociopaths are very self-centered and callous, and then somebody might also throw in narcissists. For me, the way I describe it is really on a continuum. Psychology is late in the game. As a matter of fact, the book of Proverbs and Psalms describes categories of people. The best way to view sociopaths and psychopaths is on a continuum of 1 to 10 in terms of selfishness. That the more I allow my ego to go unchecked and take the brakes off my conscience, I can begin to become more and more selfish, and therefore, instead of loving people and using things, guess what I do? I invert those. Mm-hmm. The way I describe it to people is have them picture on a car lot. You can have a narcissist, sociopath, and psychopath. 3 salespeople, they will look different. Somebody comes on the lot. The narcissist is all about plaques. It's all about looking good. He likes the ego strokes. He likes it when people recognize him. That to him is the payoff. So somebody will come on the lot. The narcissist may get there first. And so as he's checking himself out in the reflection of different windows of the vehicles, as he's walking up to someone, he's going to make a pitch. And if they don't buy, he kind of sloughs it off. But he really wants more plaques and he wants more recognition. But he's kind of harmless in a way.
As long as you don't date him. Yeah.
unless you live with him.
Or make a baby with him. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
The sociopath is all about the sale. So a sociopath is an expert salesman. But he operates on cost-benefit analysis. So he will stop once the cost outweighs the benefit. So he then takes over. So let's say the narcissist tries to sell a vehicle. He's not successful. The sociopath then will step in, and he knows how to close this deal. What's it going to take to get you into this vehicle? And let's say he's still not successful. He'll finally stop if the person, for whatever reason, says, no, enough. Well, he starts walking away. The psychopath will look at the sociopath and say, well, what happened there? And the guy says, well, they're not going to buy. He says, well, I'll show you how it's done. The psychopath walks up. They still say no. So what's he do? He goes in and he gets a shoulder-fired missile or, a Law's rocket. And as the people are driving off, he's going to shoot them and make the car blow up. Why? Because how dare they cross him? Because he's going to have the last word. He didn't give them permission to leave. The difference between a sociopath and psychopath is sociopath is cost-benefit analysis. He wants to benefit. If he stops benefiting, he will stop and he will go away. Psychopath is dedicated to having the last word, the last say, and the last laugh. They play for keeps. They're the chess master. For them, it's all about ego. It's a different animal, but really it's a different degree of morphing of ego. When you deal with a sociopath, they won't be the ones to plague your life after you say no thank you and you draw a boundary. So they're the salespeople. They'll try to get a foot in the door, but when you say thanks but no thanks, they'll eventually go away after 2 or 3 times. A psychopath will make it his or her goal not just to make your life miserable, but to make you regret ever having had the temerity to establish boundaries. That's a psychopath. And it doesn't matter what it costs them.
I have a question. You just piqued my mind. You just put my mind into a bunch of spins with this information. I had Mildred Muhammad on the podcast before. She was married to the DC sniper. She is a domestic abuse survivor who speaks all around the world. What about the women who are trying to leave an abusive man? Do you think we're dealing with psychopaths, or is it just misogyny, or is it possession?
Yeah, that's right. If it's possession, they would have an excuse. That's my joke. No, really. If it's possession, then that's a different ballgame as well. Somebody, needs to be very mindful of that. And possession, by the way, there's a very good description in the New Testament. I really do think that's sort of like a beehive experience. I do believe I have experienced some of that, having worked in prison. But if you go to church for any length of time, you might encounter those types of people too. But really, if you're dealing with a psychopath, a sociopath, again, won't wish ill upon you, won't do you harm. The moment you start to sense that somebody's going to do you harm, and that can be in a bunch of different ways, right? When we think in terms of harm, we think in terms of physical abuse. That's only one way to harm someone. As a matter of fact, the more sophisticated someone is, the less blood they will shed, because they don't want to go to prison. That's why you have the bloody psychopath, quite frankly, has very few victims, because they're only going to get away with that for so long until they're busted. I'm not minimizing bloody psychopaths. I've worked with survivors, and I've worked with the bloody psychopaths, serial rapists or murderers in solitary confinement in prison there. But it is the white-collar psychopath, and I even consider pedophiles in that. It doesn't mean they're less lethal. What it means is this: they have a greater body count. Let me define that. I don't mean actual bodies. What I mean is this: they have a greater number of victims because they're so smart and they're so good at it. So I can have a victim that I've actually killed that no longer has a pulse, or I can have a victim in my wake that can't pin it on me, but I have done significant damage to them emotionally or financially, relationally. I have left my mark on them.
Punish them. Punish them for leaving.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A sociopath won't punish someone because it doesn't. They don't get anything out of that. A sadistic individual and a psychopath are one and the same. So it's a greater degree of sadism. A good example of a psychopath that most people won't think of is if you've seen the Disney or Pixar film Tangled, Rapunzel. Mm-hmm. Think about Mother Gothel. If you want to, because psychopaths come in all shapes and sizes, and I make a joke of it that most people have one in their own family, but I really believe that's true. You want to find that out, you draw a boundary, and you'll find it out by speaking truth and drawing boundaries, and that's really one and the same. Speaking truth and boundaries are based upon preferences. You'll find out about the nature of someone. A sociopath will try to manipulate you, but they'll stop once they see that they're not going to get away with that. A psychopath won't. So a psychopath can be in your own home, and if you, quote unquote, cross them, and what does that mean? It doesn't mean you double cross them. What it means is you're actually starting to have a voice. You're actually starting to, right? You're starting to have a preference. You're at the dining room table, or you're at the Thanksgiving table, and you actually say, you know what, this isn't working for me any longer. Now you'll see morphing in front of you. If there's a psychopath, you'll see them change. You'll see them morph. And so they are the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing, whether in church or not. And so in the movie Tangled, if some woman wants to find out if she's married to one, or better yet, if she has a mother, right? You watch in that film, and whoever wrote the song Mother Knows Best nailed it to a T. There you're going to see the sophistication of an artful psychopath. Because what she has to do, what a psychopath has to do, is they have to dismantle and disarm something within the person that they're going to be taking advantage of, and that is called their intuition. So every survivor, what has to happen for a survivor to get healed and get whole is their intuition has to come back. But if someone is trying to manipulate another person, they're playing with their intuition. Intuition and conscience are two sides, heads and tails of the same coin. They allow information about something that's very invisible, and that has to do with relationships and intentions within a relationship. My conscience keeps me in check to make sure I don't violate your boundaries. My intuition keeps you in check by giving me information, though I need to double check that information about you and your intentions, because if you intend me harm, or flip it around, let's say I want to take advantage of you. If my conscience isn't going to stop me, then what's to stop me? It better be you and your intuition to establish boundaries. And so the psychopath is a master at distorting reality and telling the person and their intuition, I know what it looks like, but it's really not that.
So they're gaslighters.
There you go. But gaslighting, that term has been widely used. Gaslighting in its truest sense, if you've seen the original movie, is some woman or the victim never speaks ill or never fights back. They just become a doormat. But exactly, they are gaslighters, but they're very sophisticated at it. But exactly, using that term, they are gaslighters. And so they intend to do everything that they're doing and nothing other than what they're doing.
And they typically play the abuse victim themselves, right? They try to...
Oh, absolutely. The martyr. Yes.
I can't believe she left me. She was such a horrible... She's a liar. She's a slut.
That's
she's
right.
a horrible mama.
And you can plot it out. The moment you start to have boundaries, because the person is moving somewhere, meaning the psychopath, they're all about using people. That's all they do. So they have an objective. If you thwart that objective by having a voice or having a preference, then they will start the process of trying to ensure that those boundaries go down once again. If you begin to call them on it, then there's a very typical pattern. I lay some of that out in survivorsupport.net, some of the little posts that I've put out there.
Which is a great website, by the way. Check it out, listeners, please. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. No, but you'll see that. You'll see the person initially, and it's all about distorting reality again. It's all about causing the survivor or the person on the receiving end of this to doubt themselves. So the moment I finally say, wait a second, you know what? No, thanks, but it's not going to happen again, and I think I know what you're all about. The person will play shocked. They'll have plausible deniability, so they still want to keep that air of being nice. But the moment that starts to become unmasked, they will eventually morph into somebody that's going to go on the attack. And they will begin to then turn on you. And they'll do it very artfully. How dare you accuse me of this? I can't. After all I've done for you, this is
Right.
the thanks I get. Right?
Exactly.
So, right? And so it's very predictable. And eventually then, now they will go literally on the attack in one way or the other. And that's why before someone's, let's say a survivor or anyone, but especially a survivor, the problem I have with a lot of counselors, unfortunately, is they try to encourage survivors to confront, but to confront too soon. There's a difference between confronting out of my need, which leaves me in a very vulnerable and helpless position, because that means I need the other person to agree or consent with what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're not going to.
Right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to confront, and the word confront doesn't mean knock down, drag out. It simply means this. I place in front of. So I'm placing truth in front of someone, but to be able to do that, I have to have resolved it away from that person, so that regardless of how they respond, and they're typically not going to respond well, because if they were going to respond well, they would have already responded well by now by bringing it up to me and apologizing. But because they don't intend to, when I am forced to finally bring it up, if I'm a survivor, then I have to anticipate I'm not going to get buy-in. I'm not going to be on the receiving end of a receptive audience. I'm going to receive pushback, and I'm going to anticipate them now eventually attacking me. Mm-hmm. So if you confront, it has to be out of your healing, which means you don't need anything from them, including acknowledgement of what they've done.
Yeah, because they're not going to. Yeah. They're just going to keep rationalizing it and projecting.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So genuine confrontation simply means I've done the work behind the scenes, away from this person. I've come to certain conclusions. I may be open to, and it depends upon who you're going to be dealing with. You know, a boundary is not a brick wall, but it depends upon who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a perpetrator, then you need a brick wall because they're never going to change. But a true boundary matches the type of person that I'm dealing with. So ideally there's a door, but a door also has a lock, right? Just like our own front doors. So sometimes I can allow someone in, but it's my choice. But ultimately, if I need a certain response from someone, then I'm held hostage, and that's not coming from a place of strength and healing. And that's where you have a lot of survivors, unfortunately, they crumble, and the latter state, the latter effect, is worse than had they never confronted in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's therapy is their own, everybody's journey is their own, and who am I? You know what I'm saying? But I would think it's kind of futile to look for your psychopath to say I'm sorry at any point in your recovery, just because that person you're getting healthy. It's not about them. They're unhealthy. So why would you even try to get an I'm sorry from somebody who wanted to punish you for not being in their life anymore?
There you go. As a matter of fact, if they had wanted to say they're sorry, they would have already done it by now. They would have already approached you saying, hey, it's come to my mind that I've done certain things. They're going to be specific. And then they will also say this. If after laying out what they've done, they'll also give you an open door. They'll have an open door policy. They'll have an open door access. They'll give you open door access. But if you have to be the one to bring it up, and it's a significant thing, more than likely they already know, and the reason they're not bringing it up is because they're not sorry.
No, they're probably still continuing to try to harm you. That's what I was that's what I was trying to speak with you. I used the wrong terminology earlier in our chat when I said possession. I didn't mean demonically possessed, although I do believe that happens. I do believe that happens. But what I mean is, like, women are property, children are property, and so a lot of women who are fleeing an abusive husband, an abusive boyfriend, a lover who won't let them go, they seem to be very much caught up in these cycles of you're still property according to the state.
That's right.
How do you get away?
That's right. The fancy little psychobabble term, as we call it, objectification. That simply just means this. Again, we are created, we're designed in a way that we're supposed to love people and use things. The more my ego, the more self becomes, the more it grows, the more I care more about me than you, my ego is going to grow. Therefore, you're less of a person to me and you're more of an object. You're more of to be used for my benefit. And as my ego is growing, if all of a sudden you tell me, I don't like this arrangement, so whatever term that psychology wants to use now, I'm not viewing you as a person, therefore I'm viewing you as an object, and I have the right, and my inner world, and hence sociopaths, but really psychopaths, my inner world now sees things differently, but I'm responsible for that. What it sees is it's all about me. So think of a 2-year-old that now has stayed by choice, a spoiled 2-year-old, but now he's in his 30s. He doesn't throw a temper tantrum at Walmart. Now he's going to lash out in a very sophisticated and diabolical way. Mm-hmm. That's what you're dealing with. It's not because he's wounded. A lot of survivors want to believe people act out because they're wounded. What I tell them is this. Hurt people, meaning a hyphen, wounded people don't hurt. Selfish people hurt people. Now, can we all make mistakes? We all have a bad day? Yes, but I'll tell you what. The normal average person, once they know they were a jerk, they came home, had a rough day, let some things fly out of their mouth, what's the responsible thing to do? Because I know I've done it. How do I know I've done it? Well, hopefully I've created the atmosphere where people can approach me in my home. But let's say I actually saw the impact in their eyes and on their face. I need to go back that same day and make it right. Why? Because I have a conscience and because they matter. If I don't, it's not because of my woundedness at that point. It's because of my self and my ego, even if I was wounded. So there will be a decreasing frequency of selfishness on a regular or normal person's part. They're not going to continue giving themselves permission to be jerked for a day without taking care of that issue. So it decreases. But in a quote-unquote dysfunctional home, what it really means is that's simply means it's not functioning very well, because what's happening is truth is getting swept under the carpet. There's a decreasing, where there should be a decreasing frequency of junk. It allows it to continue. What allows it? Me and my ego, if I'm that person. Why? Because I benefit, because I love being able to spew if I'm that kind of person. I feel better. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, now I just spewed all over everybody. Now the question is this. Once I know I've done that, what am I going to do about that? If I feel no compelling reason to go take care of that and put myself in check, that's not because of my background, that's not because of my woundedness, that's because of my ego. So in our own journeys to healing, we also have to make sure we keep our egos in check and that we're keeping short accounts. But someone that views another person as an object, they're simply just a massive ego on legs, walking around with self-entitlement. And whether it's, with a spouse, because it's not just, and I get all over men, because we men are oftentimes the problem, but you can have very sophisticated women.
That's what you said. I didn't say it. I'm just going to say I agree with you, sir.
Yeah.
Because men are trained that their ego is, men are trained that their ego is so much more important. We have to protect the male ego.
That's right.
But
it's the human heart. It bypasses gender, and that's why the song Mother Knows Best in that film.
True.
You have such a powerful situation which a lot of daughters can relate to. You have a mother that is manipulative. Well, that bypasses gender. And so, when you have somebody that, quote unquote, claims ownership over another person, what it means is you have someone that, as the inmates say, I'm doing me. Yeah, they're doing me. They're doing them. Mm-hmm. Meaning life is all about them. And so they can take whatever they want in one way or another. So when you have in prison, I would oftentimes hear that. Well, Mr. Uhler, my baby's mama's, in plural.
Right.
Okay, what does that tell you? You're dealing with a guy that's all about self.
Can't commit.
There you go. Well, he chooses not to because he doesn't want to deny himself.
Well, he's also in prison, so it's not like he can show up with a pizza and take a girl to a movie.
But when he gets out, I'll tell you what, the vast majority of them won't decide to be the right kind of dad. Now, I'm not getting down on guys that are in prison. The fact is, how many people, once it's brought to their attention that they have been hurtful, how many people will go back around and make things right? Not a lot of people.
Some do. Some are very much come out of prison with a bent to succeed.
If you are on the receiving end of someone that's treating you as a piece of property or someone that is hurtful, you need to set up boundaries. Boundaries are just fancy little terms saying you need to speak truth and base that upon your preferences. And if you fear that someone's going to react strongly, then you need to have a plan, especially if it's going to risk the possibility of actual harm. So, do the homework behind the scenes. Always ensure your own safety, but nobody should ever fear anything that's going to go on in a home. A home should ultimately be a place of calm and tranquility, or at least moving always in that direction. We always encounter challenges and trials in life, but that's enough, meaning life has a way of bringing that. Ideally, home should be a refuge, not a war zone.
No, I believe in that wholeheartedly. Like, we're not going to have peace on earth until we can be nice to our mom, our dad, our uncle, our aunt, and the cousins and the kids, That's right. At least just trying to make peace. Sometimes you can't. Right. Sometimes you do your best. You're dealing with a psychopath. But right. I wanted to ask you one last question. And again, thank you so much. You've been so gracious. And I love all the details that you're sharing with my listeners and me. These people that you've helped in prisons, I understand that a majority of women who are incarcerated are sex abuse victims themselves, often through childhood trauma to teenage trauma, up to when they are incarcerated. Is that true with the men as well?
No. And excellent question and a great point. I would not have known that until my first introduction to that concept was working residential treatment with teens. And here I was familiar with inpatient and outpatient, but it was my clinical director at the time that kind of helped me understand there's a difference, because it was a co-ed facility, 120 kids on grounds.
Okay.
she said this, and she's very, very wise. She said, John, for adolescents and therefore men, guys, their offenses will run the gamut from minor to profound. For girls, and therefore for women, you tend to have one extreme or the other, and it's rare that a woman will perpetrate a violent offense. She said women typically aren't violent. When you have a woman that's perpetrated a violent offense, it's in the minority, it's very rare, but when it happens, it's very lethal. Usually what happens is women get caught up with guys that will use them, and therefore, because of the propensity toward people-pleasing and codependency and other issues like that, women can easily be used by guys, and therefore a lot of the women that are in prison, in one way or another, got caught up with guys or got caught up in something. Unlike the majority of guys that in prison, male prison, you will see represented within general population the full continuum of offenses, unlike women in prison. So the vast majority of women in prison, and it's correct, have been sexually abused early on. And therefore, the issue of their boundaries was already impacted. They already had a difficult time discerning. They lacked their intuition, and they were easy prey, therefore, for the guys in their lives that came along and used them. A simple example is running drugs, or he had her drive and she got caught up with that, or she was, different terms, that she was the mule or whatnot, and that simply means she was carrying the drugs. She gets found with them, and she takes the fall for the guy, and she's not going to tell on him. So you have a lot of those kind of situations where they participated, but they didn't instigate it.
So they're just caught up. They're kind of victimized all
That's
over
right.
again. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then they go to prison, and the physical structure of a female prison is the same as a male prison, meaning the physical layout. And therefore, it not only is not conducive for healing, but then the policies and procedures and the things, it's almost identical, including solitary confinement. And I have huge concerns about putting a woman that was already, emotionally traumatized, and not that they may or may not be acting out, but they've done something, they broke some rules, now they're put in what amounts to solitary confinement. Then it gets worse. And so you have so many women that are in need of mental health treatment that are not receiving it. And what's tragic is they come out and there's very few programs. My heart goes out to them, and maybe someday we'll be able to attend to that as well.
That's a good goal.
That's a whole mission field right there. The churches and other faith-based groups should be reaching out to women coming out of prison to help not only reunify with family, but also with that transition back to the community. They need a lot of help and support.
Well, I think we all need a lot of help and support, and I think you're doing
That's
a great job building this new website, survivorsupport.net. And I urge everybody listening, just go check it out, especially if you feel inclined, because you are a survivor. There is a community for you. Please do join. Thank you so much, Jon Uhler. Good luck with your new project. And thanks, y'all, for listening. Please do join me, as well as Jon online. Come to my website, lisalandry.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. It doesn't cost you anything. You'll support my work, and you'll also have first notification of when this podcast drops every Womanist Wednesday. Shout out Ari Bear. It's the season for Halloween. Psychopaths, sociopaths, and people dressed up as slutty nurses. I don't know what you're going to be this time for Halloween, baby, but I'm sure there's a hockey mask somewhere nearby.